Hello everyone, this video is all about sprint planning. If you are a new Scrum Master or someone new to the Agile or enthusiastic about Agile, consider subscribing my channel in which I post a new video every week. So coming to the topic, what is sprint planning? So it's self-explanatory. It's a planning event in which the full Scrum team sit together and plan for the sprint. So be it 2 week sprint or 1 month sprint, they plan for the complete sprint. Typically, sprint planning addresses three questions: why, what, and how. Why? Why is this sprint valuable? Meaning the sprint goal. So each sprint should deliver something valuable to the customer. What is the value that we are delivering to the customer? Second, what? What can be done in this sprint? Although we have a lot of requirement, what fits into this sprint is something that we have to decide. And the third one, how? How this will be done. So the developers discuss on how this can be accomplished. So these are the three main topics that needs to be addressed in the sprint planning. Let's deep dive into the sprint planning event. So when it happens, who attends and who runs it? Ideally, the sprint planning should be conducted on the first day of the sprint. For a 1 month sprint, planning can happen for 8 hours. That's the maximum limit that is set by the Scrum Guide. For a 2 week sprint, which is typically most of the team has, for the 2 week sprints, we have 4 hours. But in my experience, with proper pre-planning, the planning event should not take more than 2 hours. Then who all attends the meeting? So it's going to be entire Scrum team. So when I say Scrum team, it's inclusive of developers, Scrum Master, and product owner. The stakeholders may or may not be invited. In general, we don't invite the stakeholders for the sprint planning meeting. And next, who runs it? So typically, Scrum Master runs the planning event. And if you are a Scrum Master watching for more information, please watch this video until then. You will get a lot of insights on how to run the sprint planning. So before deep diving, let's understand at a high level on what is the input and what is the output of the sprint planning. So what is the input for sprint planning? There's only one, and which is really key, is the product backlog items. It is the primary input for the sprint planning, which should be ready and available before doing the sprint planning. And what is the output of the sprint planning event? It is the sprint backlog and the sprint goal. So these are all information that is available almost everywhere, but what I would like to share is some insights on how do you actually run the sprint planning. So based on my experience, I would like to classify the sprint planning itself into 3 different parts. What do we do before the sprint planning? What do we do on the sprint planning? And what do we do after the sprint planning? Actually, there is no predefined prerequisites for the sprint planning, but this is basically my recommendation. So that will ease out the sprint planning process and helps you to run a smooth sprint planning. So what do we do before the sprint planning? It is like a preparation for sprint planning. The first thing, the important thing is backlog refinement. So as a Scrum Master, you have to facilitate this backlog refinement mid of the sprint for the next sprint, for refining the stories that we are planning for the upcoming sprint. Backlog refinement event is not a mandatory event, but I would strongly recommend it for teams that have complex stories. So this will reduce the time in the sprint planning. We will refine the story, estimate it, keep it ready for the sprint plan. Next, Scrum board readiness. Just a couple of days before the actual sprint planning, discuss with the product owner to align the stories in the board based on the prioritization. So the product owner is completely responsible for coming up with a list of backlog that we can pick for the sprint and prioritizing it before the event. As a Scrum Master, you can discuss with the product owner and be sure the stories are prioritized. Next, spillover stories. So when you are nearing the sprint and last day of the sprint, you will foresee, or you can foresee on what is likely to spill over. So you can give a heads up to the product owner to see whether that makes sense to take this to the next sprint or put it back to the product backlog item. So it is not the best practice that once the story is spilling over, directly move it to the next sprint. That's not the best practice. If there is a spillover, it again goes for a discussion. The product owner should think about it, whether it makes sense to work on the same story next sprint, or can it wait? Can it sit in the product backlog item and wait for some time, and we'll pick it in the future? So about the spillovers, you can give a heads up to the product owner for him to plan. And the next important thing that might be missed in a lot of team is feedback from sprint review and sprint retro. So these even happens, but these are all disconnected. You get free feedback in sprint review from stakeholders. You get feedback from the dev team and your scrum team in the retrospective session, and it all sits separately. But ideally, we have to consider all that in the sprint planning, right? While the product owner focuses on the stakeholder feedback, the product vision, you can remind him about the internal team's feedback in the sprint retrospective meeting. So discuss about the things that you observed in these meetings, and let the product owner decide whether that makes sense to keep that in the next sprint or not. And the last one is capacity or velocity check. So I say both capacity or velocity, because some teams go by capacity planning and some teams go by velocity planning. Both are fine, but we need to be ready on what is the capacity for the next sprint or what is the velocity that we can commit for the next sprint. To give a little bit explanation on these two, so what is capacity driven planning? So as a Scrum Master, you have to be on top of what is the available capacity for the next sprint. And this depends on various factors. The first thing is consider the productive hours and the number of person you have. The productive hour usually we have for our team is 6 hours. Although we have 8 working hours, 2 hours per day is categorized for the meetings. So the productive hour for delivering the sprint goal is 6 hours per day. So if you have a team of 10 and considering 6 productive hours per day, you will have 60 hours for one day, and multiplied by 10 days in a sprint, you will have 600 hours capacity. And after this, you have to consider the common holidays or any team outing planning or any other event that might disrupt this hour. So consider reducing all those, and then get a high level leave plans from the team and reduce the leave hours also. So that will be your final capacity. So I'm reiterating, calculate the productive hours as I said, and then reduce the planned leaves from the team, reduce holidays and any other common meeting that will disrupt the sprint progress. So that will be your capacity. So you have to come up with this capacity before starting the sprint planning if you are doing a capacity driven planning. The second one is velocity driven planning. For experienced team, this makes sense. So they have seen a lot of sprint and they know that this is the velocity of the team probably. You cannot take the velocity of the other team and set it as yours. So you have to evolve over time that you will get your velocity, and then slowly you can start planning in your velocity. So if your team's velocity is like say 40 story points, so you can go by velocity planning also. So generally we consider the velocity to be the average story points delivered in the last 6 months. But if there are drastic change in the team members, number of team members, then you have to reconsider it, and it's better to do the capacity planning. And I would personally feel capacity planning gives way more clarity than the velocity planning. So these are the items that I would do before going for the sprint planning meeting. This sets the base, and we will have a lot of information even before starting the sprint planning. Next, what do you do while on the sprint planning, or how do you run the sprint planning? This is very crucial. So if you have no experience and you want to visualize what happens, then I think this will help you. First, start and set the tone for the meeting. You can start by officially ending the previous sprint and acknowledge the progress that the team has made, appreciate them. And then you can talk about the available capacity for the current sprint, or you can talk about the velocity that we can plan for the current sprint. That gives a clarity to the team on what they can take for the sprint. So this kind of sets the stage for the upcoming sprint. Next, call the PO to give the big picture, the sprint goal. The PO should give a big picture on what we are going to plan for the sprint goal, and it should have a clarity to the team on what they are going to work for the sprint. Once the high level vision for the sprint is shared, the product owner or the Scrum Master can also share more information on how the stakeholder feel about this requirement, or any other information, any other supporting information that they want to share on the particular product backlog items the PO want to progress. So now you know the capacity, the team knows the capacity, and the team is having the sprint goal defined. And also based on the pre-planning we did, The product owner has come up with a list of product backlog items. It is their set priority wise. Then, as a Scrum Master, you share your screen. If you have a Rally board or a Jira board and you have the list of prioritized stories, you go one by one. First, you pick the first story, and the product owner explains the purpose of story, and the development team can ask various clarifying questions around the business and try to get the clarity on the requirement, and then they discuss on how to implement it at a high level, and they probably break it down into various tasks and task it at the hour level, right? So this is how a story is taken, discussed, and broken into tasks. Once it is done, then they go for the next one. So while you do a capacity driven planning, while they split the task, they give hours, they estimate the story based on the available information. And at certain point, you as a Scrum Master, you should be able to cross verify between the available capacity and the committed ones of the current sprint, and just be sure that the team is not over committing. So the stories are taken one by one until you think that either the capacity is full, or that's all the work you have in hand. So while this happens, there could be some situation where the developers might struggle to come up with an estimate on the spot. As a Scrum Master, you can educate that this is a planning event and it is an estimate. So they can go by whatever information that is available, and it is still fine if there are additional information coming out. There is a scope creep or difference in understanding. The actuals can go more than what is estimated, which is completely fine. That's how the team learns. When you give this confidence to the team, definitely they will progress. So remember, you cannot plan the complete sprint hour by hour. It's not going to happen. It's like a high level plan, like how you plan for a trip. So while you plan for a trip to some place, you will not plan it hour by hour. Probably you can plan 3 or 4 events per day, but not hour wise. So similarly, you should be able to plan on what you'll be able to achieve in this 10 days or in this 1 month of sprint, and you will not be able to plan for every hour of the sprint. So this is something that you can remind the team while they do the sprint planning or while they struggle with estimating the stories. Next, so the previous step, we broke the stories into tasks. Next, we need to see who wants to work on it. Typically, the development team themselves should discuss and come up with a person who wants to work on it based on the prior experience and the required knowledge for that story. So that's how they align and self-organize on who wants to work on it. And the last one, confirm alignment. So there should be a common consensus by the team that this is what they are committing for the sprint. All the committed stories should align to the sprint goal, and all of them should be aware of what is the sprint goal, what is that's assigned to them, and they are good to progress on it. So there should be a overall team consensus. As a Scrum Master, you can ask questions to product owner that all the important PBIs are covered, whether we are good with the list that's committed, and you can discuss with the development team on whether they are comfortable on what is assigned to them, and do they foresee any risk in that. So you can give some time to discuss on any risk they foresee and confirm on their alignment. So these are items that you as a Scrum Master should do while on the sprint planning. While the sprint planning is majorly for the development team, the majority of the planning event is happening between the product owner and the development team. But the Scrum Master is very crucial because you have a lot of things to do even before the planning. So that sets the space, and that gives a lot more clarity to the development team as well. And the way you facilitate the meeting and the way you support the team, you as a Scrum Master should be a true leader. When you see the product owner is pushing things on the development team to be committed due to the pressure that is there from the stakeholder, you as a Scrum Master should be as a guard and see what the team can take and see to that you are not overcommitting on them. So that will burn their hands, and eventually it's going to reduce the morale of the team. But remember, you are not the person only for the development team. You have to be on the other side as well. And usually when mid of the sprint, when some reprioritization happens, when the product owner comes up with a high priority work that needs to be done, usually you might see a reluctant behavior from the development team. But as a Scrum Master, you have to make them understand to be agile. So you have to embrace the changes if it is a very required one. If the product owner feels that this is the priority one, then we have to reprioritize on what is in our hand. So you have to help the product owner in and talk for him to the development team and make them understand and reprioritize the story so that it doesn't burn their hands. So the Scrum Master is not a person for the development team or not a person for the product owner. You have to be on both sides whenever required. So you have completed the sprint planning. What next? What do we do after the sprint planning? So if you have done your planning in velocity driven model, then probably you can ask your team to ask out the stories and add their estimates. So that happens after the planning event. In the velocity driven planning, they usually take the story points as a reference, and when the total number of story points matches the velocity, they stop the planning there. They might not split it into further tasks and add estimates. If that is your case, then you can talk to the development team and ask them to task out and estimate their stories. The next important thing is ensure that the dev team analyze on what is assigned to them and they are sure on how to progress on it. And if there is any dependency or if they need any help, then that has to come out on the first day so that you can plan for it. And the next thing is hear out the plan from them, like in which order they want to work, because there could be some dependency that one person is working on and the second person might be dependent on that story's delivery. So the first person have to prioritize that story. If he's having 3 stories, then make sure that he's prioritizing this story first. So what is the likely order in which the dev team want to work on the stories that's assigned to them? So that's good to discuss about it on the next day of your daily scrum. And once this is all done, the last thing is get to work. I think you have a solid plan, and you will inspect the progress and the risk on the daily basis through daily scrum, and then that result in a smooth delivery. So I think this give you a clarity on what all we do as part of sprint planning. Let me know if this helps and if you would like to add on anything on top of it. If you like this video, please consider subscribing my channel. That motivates me to do a lot more video. The channel runs on your motivation. Thank you.